How is the British national interest being served by what's going on in Brussels today? Can Britain continue ultimately being a member of the European Union as it's currently constituted? Joining us, Persson, Director of Open Europe, it campaigns for British influence EU campaign group. Gentlemen, a very good morning to both of you. Peter, let me start with you if I may. There was Ed Miliband. We just talked to him in Edinburgh saying David Cameron ought to be building alliances. David Cameron thought he was building alliances. He thought he had an alliance with Angela Merkel, but the German welched on the deal.
Well, there's no question that if the vote goes the way it does today, then David Cameron is 1-0 down after 10 minutes.
Oh, go on. Start by my question before, and then you can say what you're going to say.
Well, I mean, he certainly sought the alliances to thwart the Juncker candidacy. You could argue that he should have done it earlier, and he should have done it better. But the fact of the matter is, Jena-Claude Juncker is just one story of many in this European debate. And the fact of the matter is that the reform agenda that David Cameron has got substantial allies for. 20, 21 countries in the European Union want to change it. So the question is, after today, he must go forward and build those alliances of reform, and he's got a hell of a lot of support for that. He didn't have a hell of a lot of support for Juncker. Move on.
Yeah. Matt Persson, that's the point, isn't it? Don't personalise this. Don't make this ad hominem. Don't try and pretend that all the troubles of this institution are bound up in the personality of one man who, according to the Daily Telegraph this morning, has his first cognac with breakfast.
Well, we can discuss tone and tactics, but of course Cameron is right to some extent that Jena-Claude Juncker has been associated with the European project for a very, very long time, and has been playing a key part in some of these negotiations that have led to an EU that does too much in too many areas and that has drifted away from the electorates. And so yes, I mean, we shouldn't perhaps personalize it too much, but there is an element of truth there when Cameron says that Juncker does personify some of the problems that we've had with the European Union in the past. But also, and I must add this, listening to Peter about this and also Ed Miliband before him, it was the Labour government that signed up to the Lisbon Treaty, which created this mess in the first place to some extent, with the European Parliament now being charged, so it seems, of appointing the European Commission President. I think actually the people behind Peter's own organisations also support the Lisbon Treaty. So there are quite a few people in Britain as well who need to have a long, hard think about their role in setting up this failure in the first place.
Peter Wilding, isn't there something a little bit refreshing about a British politician, any politician actually, going to Brussels and saying, look, I don't mind being in a minority of one. I'm going to take my position. A bit like that lovely black and white film with Jimmy Stewart, you know the one I mean, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. When he goes and he takes on the lot, he knows he'll lose, it doesn't matter, he's making a principled stand.
Absolutely, and Alexander Stubb, the Finnish Prime Minister, said exactly that. Principle is important, and both Mats and I agree that David Cameron and, of course, the other political leaders in this country are standing against this man. But he's not the only one. The fact of the matter is nobody in the heads of government state, or very few people, wanted Juncker as the president of the Commission. And the fact also is, therefore, that it's critical for the UK to build those alliances for the most important thing that we have to deal with right now, which is to complete the single market and to make sure that the democratic deficit that Matt's quite rightly referred to in signing up to the Lisbon Treaty is addressed. Everybody agrees that national parliaments around Europe should have more of a say over what happens at the European level. And the truth of the matter is, Britain has got a lot of friends out there. And the trouble we have is that we're concentrating eternally on our isolation, when we should be concentrating on the fact that we have a leadership role in Europe. And you know, it wasn't so long ago that somebody said of Britain that we had a Morris Minor economy and a Rolls-Royce diplomacy. I want us to have a Rolls-Royce economy and a Rolls-Royce diplomacy. And the trouble is we're not doing as well as we could do in building the forces of alliances of our friends across Europe in order to make the change. Because everybody agrees that change must be made.
Persson, Peter Wilding uses the word leadership there. On the question of leadership, aren't we in danger of getting slightly strung out here about a leadership question which actually has very little importance? In the great scheme of things, whoever turns out to be the titular head of the European Union, the president of the Commission, you know what, they've got very little clout. They've got very little clout. Why we're having this debate, he doesn't matter.
Well, I wouldn't go as far as to say he doesn't matter, but I agree he's not the king of Europe. I mean, Jean-Claude Juncker will not single-handedly decide what happens in Europe in the next several years. So I mean, I agree on that point that he's not the deal breaker in terms of achieving sweeping reform of the European Union, which is so desperately needed. However, of course, it is, as Cameron says, an important point of principle. Who is ultimately in charge of making the big decisions in Europe? Is it the Brussels institutions with the very shaky democratic mandate that we saw, as we saw in the European elections now just last month? Or is it democratically elected national leaders with the support of democratic elected national parliaments, which is what Cameron, the vision that Cameron subscribes to? So in that sense, it is an important proxy battle for a much bigger debate about what kind of Europe we want here and how it should be held to account. And again, I come back to my previous point. There are a lot of people who have to think about what happens when you sign up to big top-down power transferring treaties and EU documents. What happens down the road when you do that? And I think we need to learn that lesson from this. Do not sign up to things. They're not entirely sure what they actually mean in practice, because it will come back to haunt you. And again, that's where I think Labour government plays some part in this as well.
OK, Matt Persson, Peter Wilding, we have to leave it there. Thanks both very much indeed for your time this morning.